So can we start?
Yeah, we can start.
Awesome. So the first one is about the auto layouts assignment, right? So then let's go to main.storyboard. This is my blank screen. Now let me add car.
Your screen is not sharing, I
Okay,
guess.
sorry. Screen
Yeah,
sharing, entire screen. Yeah. Now?
yeah, it is very. Yeah.
Awesome. So now this is my blank project. Where I have my storyboards, a blank screen. Let me first go to my assets and then add a set, image set. I'll say car. And then here I would say single scale. And then I'll drag and drop my car image here. Fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Now I'll go to my main.storyboard. Now I have to so basically what the assignment was that you have to add two images, and then both of these should take 50% of the screen, which is basically equal. They should share equal, correct? Now what I'll do is I'll
Yeah, yeah.
show you how it is done for two images. You will use that knowledge, and then you will try as an assignment, you will try with four images. Sounds good?
Yeah, it's good.
Cool. Now let's drag and drop image views. So for images, we would use image views. First, let's design the way we want, and then we would add the auto layouts. Okay. So now and then just to demonstrate 50-50, I am going to use the top space as well. Okay. So this is my 50%,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
this is my below 50%. Fine. I have two image views
Okay.
here. Now,
Yeah. That was your rough estimate, right, Abhishek?
this is my rough
This one
estimate.
is 50% and
Correct. This is my rough estimate as
yeah,
of now.
the rough. Okay, yeah.
Correct. Great question. So this is just a rough estimate. Okay. Now I'll select the first one, the top one. I would say now you tell me. I want this to be top aligned, leading and trailing. Correct.
Yes,
Any
this too.
any confusion here? Any doubts here?
No, Abhishek.
Okay. So then I would say align to the
Uh,
top. Yeah. Tell me.
yeah, like the top trailing and the leading, and we need to give width and height also.
Okay, I'll come to width and height. So, firstly, you may not have to give width because what you are saying is stick to your left and stick to your right. Correct. So, no matter what the
Yeah.
screen size is, it will just stick to both sides. So, I am not giving width here. I am not manually giving width here. I am not saying that width should be this pixel. Sorry. So I'm not manually giving. What I'm saying is I'm telling that stick to your left and stick to your right. So if it is iPhone, you just stick to both ends. If it is iPad, you have bigger screen size. Again, you just stick to your both ends. Make sense? So I am not giving
Yeah.
a static value. I'm giving a dynamic value. I'm just saying that stick to both ends. Make sense?
Yeah.
So in this case, this is why width specifically I'm not mentioning. I'm saying this. Stick to your right and stick to your left. Okay? And then I'm saying stick
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
top. Okay? So these three I've given. Now, so width, it will not care because so basically I in the last class I mentioned that for any given UI component, you have to give these four values: x, y, where it will be on the screen in x-axis and y-axis, and height and width. Correct? Now, height and width can be a reference also. It does not have to be a specific value. Okay. So as long as I am making sense based on what width it should be or what height it should be, iOS will not complain. Okay. So
Yeah.
now width, I am not specifying how many points I need, but I am saying that you need to utilize the whole screen size. So the width will be dynamic and it will stick to both sides. So this is why Xcode will not complain for the width. It will complain for the height because we are not telling the height as of now. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've added three constraints. Now for the height, what I have mentioned is I need this 50%, correct, of the screen.
Yes,
Correct.
yes, yes,
So then
yes,
height
yes.
I cannot give this manually, because if I say 150 pixels for iPhone and iPad will be different. Even iPhone in smaller device and larger device will be different. So I cannot say it has to be this many pixel. I'll again have to do, I will have to tell that take 50% of the screen size height. Make sense?
Yeah.
Now, how do I do that? How do I say that take 50%? So we have something called multiplier. Okay. So what I would first say is, instead of saying that you take 50%, I will say take the full screen size. So I will take my image view and I'll go to my view and I'll say equal height. Okay.
Yeah.
I will first say
Equal
equal
height.
height. I'll click on this. Now I'm saying that this image view should be equal height of my view. Now equal height, if I say, now I'll click on the constraint. Okay, now if you see, okay, 1 second. Okay, so it actually, because because of my uh, because I drew this way that it is actually coming as 50%. It has already taken multiplier as 0.5, but by default it would be 1.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it will take the whole
Yeah. Yeah.
whole screen width, but I need this multiplier as 0.5 because I want it to take half of the screen size, correct?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I would just say a multiplier of 0.5. Multiplier is, I'll select, it is 0.5. So I wanted you to use this feature called multiplier. With multiplier you can actually adjust how much screen in ratio how much you need.
Okay.
Okay, now
Yeah, like
yeah,
the full screen is one, and if I want to take the half, then it should be 0.5.
exactly. If I want 1/3 of the screen size, you would say 0.33.
Okay.
Make
Yeah.
sense?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so and then so this is done. Now you have to do for this exactly the same way we would do for this as well. I'll click on here. I'll select these, and these. It says -4 and -3, because as you said, these were all my
My rough
guess,
estimate.
right? Yeah. So I will make it 0 to make it accurate. Okay, and then I'll say add constraints. Now this is done, and then for the height, I would again say, either I can just say whatever is the remaining space you take it, or I can say 50%. So because this has already taken 50%, I can just say this the space between these two to be 0. So there is something called vertical spacing. I can click on this, okay, and then it says, see, it says top space. It says mine. I can say 0. Now if you see,
Okay.
this has taken 50-50. I can also say this, I can do the same thing for this image view as well. I can go to my view and then I can say take 50% of the screen size, screen height. That would also work. But now, because for this we have already given, and this is the space that is left out, I'm just saying that just use the remaining space.
Okay.
Is it making sense?
Yes,
Some
yes.
portion, okay. Now let's do one thing. Now let's click on this. Let's give it some background color, and then let's give this also some background color of tint, and then let's select car, and then here also let's select a car. Now if you see, it is exactly 50%, correct?
Yeah.
Now what I can do, let's run it on iPhone 15 Pro Max. And I'm not sure. Okay. Let me see if I can parallelly. Okay. Works fine. Looks good.
Yeah.
50%.
Yeah. Looks good.
Now I will also run it on iPad just to make sure that it works fine. iPad 13-inch. As a standard practice, no, in companies, we actually, if you see, there are a couple of 11-inch, 13-inch, right? iPad mini also. So we run it on different iPad screens, mini, then 13-inch and then 11-inch. See, this is how it is in 13-inch, 50-50. Okay, and this is what we do. We launch different screens and then we see that this is actually coming properly or not.
Yes, Abhishek.
Fine. So then what I want now you to do is first give this a try. First you see, and then again, if you have any questions, please let me know. I will cover as many times as you want, unless you are until you are 100% sure about this. Okay, how this is done. So give this again a try today as part of your assignment, and first you try this just two, and then you try with four. Okay.
Yeah.
In four, what you have to do is even the width you will say 50%, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right. So then this will add again a little more complexity. So you do this with four images, two images, and then also do it with four images. Try test with iPhone and iPad, and then let me know if you are confident. Until you are confident, we'll keep practicing these basic auto layouts. And once these are done, then we'll move on to app development, complex UI screens development. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Vishak, you have given the vertical spacing as 0. We can do it like we can take the height as 0.5 here also. Right?
Yes, let's do that. So let's
Yeah.
take this, and then also there is something called, you can actually always select a particular constraint and you can delete also. What I can do, either I can delete the top space. Okay, let's delete this, or I can delete all the constraints of this second image. What do you want me to do?
So, like we can delete the vertical spacing, I guess.
ठीक है. So then let's delete the vertical wala spacing, and then if you see, it went a little up, right? I'll just
Yeah, yeah.
drag a little down. Okay, and then in this case I'll also do the same thing. I'll click on the view. Okay, and then I'll say equal height, and then I would say 0.5.
It already.
Fine. So
Yeah.
works same way. ठीक है.
Yeah. Okay.
0.5. So you anything that you do, there will be multiple ways to do it. We will see a couple of ways, and then we'll see what is the best way. One thing that you have to think is how, let's say, something that you have to take into consideration is that, let's say tomorrow if you have to make any changes in this screen, those changes should be minimal. The auto layout, whenever you do, right, you keep this in mind that tomorrow you may have to change the screens. Okay, so what we do as a standard practice, we use references. So we use references because if you one thing you change, then other things should automatically should adjust to that screen change. So if this one, no, if now let's say I have done this, now let's say my client says that no, I want the top view to be 30% and this bottom should be 70%. So then you don't have to go back and change two places. You can just change this one place, and then remaining this one would adjust.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is something that you should take care when you are actually working, and build that habit right from beginning. Always think that tomorrow you might have to change what you are doing today, and then that scalability should be there, and how less of a change you have to do in order to adapt to future changes. Let's quickly just see about table views. I'll just create one very simple table view, and in the assignment implement this table view and implement the auto layout. Okay, and then so this is a very basic implementation of a table view, and then in subsequent sessions we would learn about MVC, MVVM, and all of that. This is a basic implementation of a table view. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. So now you have seen image views, right? Just like image views, we have something called a table view. Okay. So if you have to display some item and rows, you can use a table view. So I'll click on plus, and I would say table view. You cannot, I'll tell you, most of these applications, like you'll find a hard time using an application without a table view or a collection view. You take any application, WhatsApp is a table view, YouTube is a collection view, any application, Instagram is a collection view. You say any application, Facebook, these are either table view or a collection view. Okay, so it is very important that you understand table views and collection views really well. And if you understand table views, collection views, exactly the same concept. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm dragging a table view here. I will make it full screen. Again, I'm not using the top area as a standard practice. I have made this full screen. I will go here and then I'll select you stick to all four sides. Okay, when I'm saying stick to all four sides, basically if it is an iPhone, iPad, whatever, it will just be full screen. Okay,
Yeah.
done. Auto layout constraints done. This is now full screen. Now this is done. Now table views have something called delegate and data source. Now we will see table views again in detail. I'm going at a very high level as of now. So in depth in subsequent sessions we will see when we learn about advanced concepts of table view. As of now, just know that there is something called data source and delegate for table views. Data source is something that tells what you are trying to populate in a table view. All right, so that is my data source. For anything you would have a data source for. So for example, this table view. So if I have a contacts screen, right? You have an iPhone, right? So if you click on contacts, you will see list of contacts, correct? So what
Yes,
are you
yes.
trying to display? You are trying to display a list of contacts, correct? So
Yeah.
table view will ask you, when you implement a table view, you'll have to tell the table view that how many contacts do you have in your app, in your phone, correct? So if you
Yes, yes.
have 5 contacts, it will display 5 rows. If you have 50 contacts, it would have 50 rows, correct? It may not display all 50 at a time, but it will have 50 rows, correct?
Yes.
Correct. So first question that table view would ask you is how many rows do you want? And second question that table view would ask you is, okay, so you have 10 rows. It's okay. I'll give you 10 rows. What do you want to display in these 10 rows? Correct. Do you want to display the name of the user? Do you want to display the number of these users? Okay.
Yeah.
So then this is the data source. Delegate is something about, let's say, what is the height of this each of these row. So those becomes my delegates. Okay. So then I have my data source and delegates. Now so what I'll do, so if you remember, we discussed about MVC, model, view, and controller, right? So then
Yes,
this
yes.
is my view. Who is my controller? Where is my controller?
View controller.
View controller, correct? So this is my controller.
Yeah.
So any logic that I'll write, where do I write?
Logic I write in now in MVC we write logic in view controller.
Controller, very good. So then I will, my view controller will supply the data source and delegate, correct? To this
Yes.
view. So I'll control and drag to my view controller, and I will select these two. I'll select data source and I will select data delegate. Got it? Basically with
Yeah.
this I'm telling that my view controller is going to implement my delegate and data source functions for this table view. Okay?
Yeah.
Now this is done. This is my first step. Next is
So basically, Abhishek, data source is basically I how many rows I want in my table view, and what are the items or let's say what are the objects I need.
correct.
Let's say label,
You are right.
image view,
You are
anything.
right. You are
Right?
right. You are right.
Yeah. And delegate means what is the height of the
Display related, view related.
okay.
So what is the height of each
Okay.
row, estimated height, those things. Take a sections. Those things would go in my
Okay.
delegate. Take it.
Yeah.
Now and then again we will see the delegate and data source. Now that was my first step. Second step is I have to create a prototype cell. So I'll click on the prototype cell says 0. I'll click on this and I'll make it 1. You can have multiple prototype cells. I'll keep it as 1. Going in at upcoming sessions, we will see how to have multiple prototype cells as well. Okay, when we will learn about custom cells. Okay.
Yeah.
So now we have prototype cells. Now each cell should have a name. Okay. This
Yes.
name is something that we would refer when we will be writing code. So I would go here and in identifier I would give this cell a name. Let's keep it cell. Okay.
Yeah.
Now this is fine, good enough. Now what I will do, I will go here in my view controller, and now here I am going to write my logic. Okay. So first, if you remember, I had delegate and data source, right? So I would say comma, and again maybe we can start with best practices right from beginning. So this is my class. Okay. There is something called extension. Okay, in Swift. So extension is nothing but to extend a capability of a existing class. Okay. So class or struct or enum. So I have my view controller. Now any of these additional functionality that we add, right? Like a delegate or a data source, which we have to add for a table view, we can do it in the base class, or we can create an extension over it. Okay? I prefer adding an extension. What I prefer as a standard practice is that my base class, no, that should not be overly populated. Okay? So I will create an extension for it. So I'll say extension view controller, and basically whatever I do this is very similar to what I could do just inside this. Okay? I'm just trying to segregate separately because I don't want to overly populate my class. Okay?
Yeah.
So I'll say extension, and then whatever I do here is very equivalent to doing something here. Okay? Make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Now here I would say UI table view delegate and UI table view data source. Okay? Now as soon as I add these two, it is complaining. It says that my view controller does not conform to the protocol UI table view UI data source. So I can say fix. Now if you see, it added two functions. Okay? Basically what happens is when I am adding these two protocols, okay, what is a protocol? Any idea? Protocol, interface, what are these?
Yeah, interface is just like methods. I forgot. I
Methods,
learned in
yeah.
Java.
You're right.
Interface.
But yeah, you are thinking correctly. So interface, what it is, or a protocol. Basically, you create a, for example, you are a Reserve Bank of India. Okay? Now, any bank that registers in India will have to follow a set of protocols. Correct?
Yeah.
So you design a set of functions that any conforming party must adapt or must implement. Okay? So if I am RBI, I'll create a set of functions, and then all of these bankings, right, like Bandhan Bank or any Dena Bank, when they'll come in the market, they will know that these are the certain functions that they'll have to implement, or some of the schemes that they have to, something very of that sort. So now basically what I'm saying is my view controller is conforming to these protocols, which means that I will have to implement the functions, the required functions of these protocols. Okay?
Yes.
So now this is why I am implementing. Now if you remember, I mentioned that for the table view data source, we have to tell how many rows do we want, and for each of these rows what data we want to display. Correct?
Yes.
So the first function is number of rows in section. Number of rows in section, I can just return, as of now, let's say return 5. Okay?
Yeah.
Which would mean I need 5 rows.
5 rows.
Now it says cell forward index path. Now index path dot row is basically the index of each row. So for example, I have 5 rows, right? Index path dot row of my first row is 0. Index path dot row of my second row is 1. Makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay? So then here okay, what is the return type of this function?
Int.
Very good. What is the return type of this function?
UI table views.
Correct. So I have to return a cell. So for that I have to create a cell object. Okay? So I'll create a cell object. Let cell equal to, and then I'll say table view. I'll use the first parameter, table view, and I'll say dot dq reusable cell with identifier, the first one. Okay?
Yeah.
Now what is the identifier? Do you remember if I told that each cell should have a name?
Yeah, cell.
Correct. We give the name as cell. So we'll give cell here. Then index path. Index path is nothing but the second parameter. Now let me explain what basically is happening here. This cell, no, what happens is, okay, let me complete, and then when we will display this table view, I'll explain more about this line of code. Okay?
Sure.
What basically this line of code. You are familiar with basic concepts of queue, dequeue, stack?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Abhishek.
That would help. Okay? So now we have let cell, and then now we want to say what do you want to display. So I'll say cell.text label.text equal to, let's say I would say iOS. Okay?
Yeah.
And then return cell. Now, based on this line of code, what do you, if I run this right now, what do you expect to see?
Like there is a cell, right? You have named this as cell, and
Yeah.
inside that cell you have basically given a label,
Huh.
and in that label, like there should be 5 cells, and in that inside the every cell, iOS will be written.
Yes, correct. Let's run this and let's see what happens. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm saying 5 cells, and each of these cells should have iOS. Make sense?
Yeah.
Very good. Now, what is this line of code? Now, table you DQ reusable cell with identifier cell for index path. So what is happening is, I let's say I have now 5. So iOS has created 5 cells for me. Okay. Now, what if I have 100 of these? Let's say contacts. I may have 100 contacts, right, on my phone.
Yes. Yes.
Now, in at one shot, in at one when I see this my iPhone, I will not be seeing 100 contacts at once, right? I would hardly see 10 or 15 based on my screen size, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So if I'm using a smaller iPhone, I may hardly see some 10 contacts, correct?
Yeah.
So why do I create 100 instances of my cell? I don't have to, right? I just have to create 10 instances of my cell. These are all about memory. Huh? How do you manage your memory? And this is why the user experience matters a lot, because you create objects only how much you need. So if you need only 10 instances of these cell, because at one given point of time, user will see only 10 of these cells, right? So I want to create only 10 cells. I don't want to create 100 cells. So all this entire thing, no, Apple has actually implemented this with queues. Okay. So you have, so there is a queue where all of these cells are object are created and added. Okay. Now queue is basically my first in first out, right?
First in, first out. Yeah.
Correct. So then what happens is, and then these are identifiers cell. So then basically identifier is something that, let's say I have two different types of cell, then we would need two different identifiers, because you want to maintain that cell types. Again, we will see about custom cells, and then you'll be able to relate with this identifier better. But basically what is happening is, if I have 100 of these, no, it will create 10 instances, and then as soon as you scroll up, right, the first one is gone, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
It will reuse the first one that you don't see for the one that is going to appear.
Okay.
Makes sense? So at a given point, it is reusing my cells, correct?
Yeah.
So these are reusable cells, and it is using Q and DQ for these reusing of these cells. So at a given point of time, I only create number of cell objects based on my screen size. If I see 15, I would only create 15.
Yes.
Make sense?
Yes, Abhishek.
Okay, so yeah,
In this screen, let's say it will support 20 cells,
correct.
right? Yeah. So when we scroll, the first one will get deleted, and the first one will come in the last.
You are absolutely right. See, so if I have 100 now, right?
Yeah.
100 instances were not created. So if you see, I have these, right? If I keep scrolling, those cells are reused here.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the concept. So then because I don't have 100 of these cells, this is done for memory management. And Apple works really hard for these memory management and these user experience, because if you keep creating 100 or thousands of instances, right, your table view will lag. Correct?
Yeah. Yes.
So make sense what basically this is doing?
Yes, Abhishek. Yeah.
Cool. Now, so basically this is what we have here. Then just one additional thing I want to cover before we wrap up. So then we have this. Okay, this is a very basic thing. Now I'll go to my main, and I'll select my cell, and instead of style custom, no, I'll keep it as subtitle. Okay. I think this is very similar to WhatsApp or a contacts app, the default contacts app. And then what I'll do, I'll create a model now. Okay. Command N, Swift file, and I'll say contact. Create. Fine. Now I'll create a struct. I'll say contact. This becomes my model. Okay. Each of these contact may have a name. So where I think we can just use let name. As a standard practice, whenever you create something, you start with a struct, and then whenever you create a variable, start with a constant. If required, you make change it to variable or a class. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let name, and then let's say let phone number. Obviously, user can have multiple phone numbers, but we will see that we will update our contacts application to have multiple numbers. As of now, let's just think that each contact has just one name and one phone number. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I will create another Swift file. I'll create contact data manager or a data source, your wish, whatever you wish to call. Okay. Now this would be my class contact data manager, and then I will create a function called static func get contacts. Okay. And this would return me an array of contacts. Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's create a couple of contacts. So contacts name and phone number, and let contact to contact name and phone number. Let's say Abhi. Let's say and then let's say Avik, and then let's say fine. And
Yeah.
then I would return an array of these contacts. How do I do it? What do I write? I want to return an array of contacts. What do I do?
I want to return, right?
Yeah.
Return.
Return.
I want so func get context, and it will return context of object, like inside an array. I am returning context of objects. Return.
So I'll create an array of contacts, and then I have created two instances, right? So I'll
Yes.
say return array, and I'll say contact 1 comma contact 2.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Yes, Abhishek. Can we return the whole contact? Actually,
As in?
like get contacts.
So basically this can get contacts return an array of contact, right? Because I will have multiple contacts. Each user will have multiple contacts. So now I'm creating these contact instances one by one, and then I create an array. So I basically it should actually I should do something like this. Get contacts is equals to, and then I'll create an array with all of the contacts, and then I would return contacts.
Okay.
Makes sense. So my instances and then my array with all these contacts, and then I return the contacts array.
Like if I have hundreds of contacts, then how could I do?
Yeah. So ideally you will not be creating these hard coding, right? You will be fetching these value from a data source. It can be your Apple's phone book. So there is a framework for Apple which you can use to get the contacts, or you can fetch from server. So in that case, you will make an API call, you will get the data, and you will parse it and you will store it. We will cover all of that, but as of now, this is basically hard coding where we are only focusing on creating your own data source. And then for this approach, if you need 100, you'll have to create 100 instances.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah. Vishal, one thing, why you have used static func get contacts?
Great question. So I want my data manager. I don't want to keep creating instances of my data manager. I want to call this. So this static is basically a class function, right? So basically, I can just call the get contacts directly from the class without creating an instance.
Okay. Yeah.
If you don't do,
I can directly use get contacts. Like contact data manager dot get contacts, I don't need to use.
Yeah, so you will not, so you don't have to say contacts data manager. You don't have to do this. When you do this, right, you create an instance, correct? you can just directly do this. So you can call this directly from the class instead of creating an instance.
Okay.
Okay, multiple ways of doing this. Okay?
Yes, Abhishek. Yeah.
Cool. We will see class static functions, why we use instance functions, and we will also see why do we use singletons. So again, a singleton also, the reason why we use is we don't want to keep creating instances. Okay?
Something shared is also there, right?
That is very, yes, that is very similar to singleton. In singleton case, you create only one instance, a shared instance, and then that you use across the application. Okay, so that
Okay.
shared is very related to singleton, which we will cover in upcoming sessions. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So then now you have contact data manager, get contacts, and then now I'll go to my view controller. And then if I had a view model, I would do this in view model, but now this is MVC, we're just starting. So I'll do this in here in my view controller. So first, these are all functions. This is a function, these are functions. I want to create a variable which I can use across these functions, right? So I'll create a variable outside of these functions. If I'll create inside this, then I can just use that inside this function, correct?
Yeah.
So I'll use it, I'll create it outside. So I'll say var contacts is equals to, and I'll create an empty array. So I'll say contacts model, contacts. This is how I create an empty array. Okay?
Yes.
And now I'll fill the data, fill this array with actual data. So I'll say contacts equal to, I'll say contact data manager dot get contacts. Okay? Now this I'm doing in view did load. What is view did load? View did load is a function that gets called first on the initial launch. So any data setup you should be doing inside view did load. So first this will be called and then these will be called. So you do all the data setup here, and then once these functions are called, you will already have the contacts array with the data. So you can now use these the contacts variable inside these functions.
Okay.
Okay? Now instead of 100, this is an array, correct?
Yes.
Array can have many data. It can have 2 or it can have 100, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So instead of 100, what do you think we should return as a number of rows?
Like in what way?
How many rows do you want?
Like how many arrays it like yeah contacts dot count. Right?
Exactly. So you basically want to return the number of elements contacts has, correct?
Yes.
So I would say contacts dot count. So whatever is my contacts array ka count, it would return that. Okay?
Yes.
And then here what I would say, I will say let contact equal to contacts my array, and then I'll say index path dot row. So as I said, right, the first row is will give index path as 0, correct? The second would give index path as 1. So this is my array, and this is how I would access an element of an array. So contacts, the first element is basically my contact 0. Contact 0 is what? My first element. So it will take the first element and it will display the name of the first user.
Yes.
Fine. So I am saying index path dot row so that for the first row it would say 0, for the second row it would return 1, and likewise. Okay. And then here I would say cell.text is equals to contact.name. And then because it is a subtitle cell, I also have something called detail text label.text, and I would say contact.number, phone number. Okay?
Yeah.
Now let's run and see what happens. I got?
Yes. Yes.
So now I'm getting this from model. So now what happens is tomorrow if you have to change any data, this screen doesn't have to change. You don't have to do anything here. All you have to go and even here you don't have to change anything here. You can just go back here and you can just change this, and then all the other files we don't have to change.
Okay.
ठीक है. So this is why
Yeah.
this approach is a better approach, because again, as I said initially also, right, you always should think that what if I have to change this tomorrow, what the change should not be major, right, and there should be only focused areas where you have to change. So if I have to add one new entry, I would just have to add it here, है ना. So
Cross application.
sorry.
Yeah, yes, Abhishek.
Yeah. So as you were asking, right? What if I have need 100? How do I do? Going forward, you have to add it. Just access the phone book to Apple's phone book framework to get the contacts framework to get the number of contacts stored on your iPad or an iPhone. In that case, all I have to change is this function. To instead of this, I'll just return the function, the contacts from the device, and then everything else remains same. I don't have to change anything. है ना?
Yeah.
Cool. So then, and then this is why I have. So if you see, I have a contacts file which has my data model, right? And then there is another file for data manager. So it is very important that you create these separate, and then a lot of users do this, a lot of developers, and then a lot of developers do this as well. This is also equally correct. So instead of this, I can do this. So in this case, I would not need my contacts file. I can do the same thing here. Each file, same file can have multiple structures and classes. So I can do this as well. This might give me a better readability because my contacts and here is all in one place. So for smaller projects like these or for smaller assignments, this approach is fine. But when you have a bigger project, right, where you have multiple data models and multiple functions, then this file will become huge, right? So then it becomes very challenging. This is why it is as a practice, we create our models as a separate file, so that your models remain in a separate file. But then this is also correct. I mean, there is no issue here for smaller use cases like these. This gives a better readability. Okay?
One thing, Abhishek, like what is the concept behind this model? Like, let's say API is there, right? One API name is there, phone number is there. So basically, I'm replicating like how my API will look like. Like I'm thinking that way. Like, what do you think?
That is exactly the right way to think. So your model actually represents your database. Okay. So whatever your database in the backend has, your model is exactly that, and your API is also nothing but what your database has stored, right? It might do some processing, but basically it would be a replica of what you have stored. So this is, and going forward, we will actually see when we will integrate APIs that this has to match exactly how your API is returning the data. Otherwise, it will not work, because the parsing and all, no, we will do it automatically. So we will not do manual parsing. So it matters a lot that whatever your API returns, your data model should represent exactly that. So for example, your model returns name and phone number, right? Model has instead of phone number, model has number. It will not work. Then you'll have to do something called coding keys, which we will cover. Now let's say your name is a string, right? Phone number is a string. Now phone number, let's say backend returns as double. Your parsing would fail. So what you are saying is exactly right, that this would represent your API return data. Okay, but think of a model as your schema of your database. So if I have to store in my database, I will be creating a contact entity with these rows, right? With these columns. It is exactly that.
Okay.
Okay, make sense?
Yeah.
Cool, great question. So yeah, Souvik. So this is it for today. I want you to create firstly the auto layouts. Complete that with 2 and 4, and then test it on iPhone and iPad. And then for this, I want you to create something like maybe I can just write down. So create student registration application, create a model for student, have create a few properties in model, create a data manager which would return an array of students, and then display student name and student primary course name in a table. And as a bonus, you embed this in a navigation controller and give a title to the table. Fine.
Yeah.
Fine. If you want, you can take a pic of this, and then I will I will upload this anyway before I sleep, so that you have this as a reference. Okay?
Yeah, Abhishek.
Fine. And this will take time, so I'll check my calendar for tomorrow. Otherwise, we'll meet on Wednesday. Okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Basically, I'm creating one student registration app. Here will be one model, few
Yeah.
properties, data manager, which would return an array of students, this per student, primary course, name. Okay.
Make sense?
Basically, one student who is enrolled to that course, right?
Yes. So let's say you have enrolled for iOS, there will be another student enrolled for Android, another student for your React Native or Flutter. But then your student model will have more data. So let your student model have the enrollment ID and then name, date of birth. Okay? All of these things let it have, and then you have this display only these two, the name and the primary course.
Yeah. One student may be enrolled to different subjects.
As of now, don't do that. If you want to do, fine, display only primary as of now, and then we will extend going forward. But if you can do that, I'll be really happy. If you can do that, each student can have multiple courses, and then you can display. Maybe you can think of playing around and see if you can come up with a better. You can enhance this a bit. I'll be super happy if you can actually come up with something like that.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Fine, Savik, then. I will